I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal.
and you're listening to Eating W's.
Eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
So, on today's episode of Eating W's, we have our top 10 wide receiver trios in the league right now. Now, last year we already did kind of this same thing, but we did it with wide receiver duos, running back duos, and then just single quarterbacks, the top 10 most talented for each of those. So this year we bumped it up a little bit, and we're going to be doing wide receiver trios today instead of duos. And then we will also be doing running back duos and then quarterbacks by themselves again as the top 10 most talented. And I usually say that we'll start off with some news first, but there is actually no news really this week.
Nothing major, nothing.
Exactly, nothing major. Maybe some signings happened here and there, some retirements or some extensions, but nothing really worth talking about, to be completely honest. So
it was a slow week.
Exactly. We do have a little bit of news about us, though, kind of about the show. Just a quick update on the schedule. So next week, Callan will be going to Green Bay to go to the Packers training camp. So pretty exciting there. So just a heads up that there will be no episode next week. We will be taking a bye next week. And then the 2 weeks after that will, of course, be the top 10 most talented running back duos and quarterbacks in the NFL for the next 2 weeks after that. And then after 3 weeks, it's pretty much going to be season time, to be dead honest, at least preseason time. So really exciting. It's finally around the corner, and we just kind of wanted to lay out the schedule a little bit and let you know that we're going to keep pumping out videos until the season starts, and then really kick it in when the season does start.
Football is almost here.
It's so close that you can taste it. It's so close. So now, instead of jumping into the news, we will just jump straight into our top 10 trios of wide receivers in the league. So we will start with our honorable mention, and Callan, I'll let you take that first.
So for my honorable mention, I went with teams like the Las Vegas Raiders, who have obvious top-heavy number ones, and also have a tight end as one of their main receiving threats. I didn't include those in my rankings. I looked at just the most talented wide receivers, top 3 wide receivers on their team. So teams like the Raiders, the Commanders, that just have that number 1 overall, the Cardinals, they're my honorable mentions because they obviously are one of the top receiver groups, but they're influenced by that top-heavy prospect or player.
Yeah, certainly. I'd agree that there's a lot of top-heavy teams in the NFL right now, one of them being the Raiders. I personally have a few of them on my actual list just because I kind of did it a little differently in my head as we were making these, but I agree that it's better to have an overall receiving corps rather than just a top-heavy wide receiver 1 and then a real drop-off after that. And then now jumping on to my honorable mention, I actually did the Jacksonville Jaguars. So right now the Jacksonville Jaguars have a bunch of guys like Marvin Jones Jr., who they got last offseason, and then Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, who they got this offseason. And the reason I put them as my honorable mention isn't even exactly because I think they're close to top 10. I think they are relatively close to top 10. But I mostly put them in there because the way they are paying these guys, they better be pretty damn close to top 10. I mean, you pick up Zay Jones this offseason and give him a pretty little contract when you have a guy like Laviska Shenault already on your roster, 2 very similar wide receivers in my opinion. You pay Christian Kirk so much more than he's worth in my opinion, so he's really going to have to boom for you or else that contract is going to be laughed out of the room. And then not to mention that even last year they picked up Marvin Jones, and if I remember correctly, overpaid for him a little bit when they got him from the Lions back in 2021. So they've just put so much money into this receiver core that it better produce, and I think it will, but not near as much as they should.
They have the combined salary of a top 10.
Exactly, definitely. So now we will jump into our actual top 10 list, starting with number 10 and back to Callan.
So for my number 10 team, and again, this is just off of sheer talent, with very little input from where the quarterback is or who the quarterback is, but it did factor just very slightly. So for number 10, I have the Panthers, who are a very young and talented group. And then, you got prove it year for Baker Mayfield, which I think will make those wide receivers better because he's going to want to play better. And I just think that their I don't know,
Team chemistry.
Their team chemistry. The fact that those three guys have been together now for over a year, not including Baker, but the three wide receivers have been together, I think that they'll all three grow really well this year.
Yeah, a little bit of a spoiler alert. These guys actually didn't slip into my top 10. Very close, though. I really like all these guys. DJ Moore showed that he can kind of carry an offense last year like he did with Darnold. Terrace Marshall was one of my favorite wide receivers coming out of that 2021 draft class, so I really hope that they can step up and do well this year. And then jumping over to my number 10, I kind of have a similar situation. I have the New York Jets slipping into the top 10, and I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but I pretty much put them here off of just the huge potential that this receiving group has. My lord, you look at a top 10 pick this year with Garrett Wilson coming in as a rookie. A lot of people were saying he's Mr. Natural, the most NFL-ready receiver in this year's draft. And then you look back at last year and you have Elijah Moore, who was probably my favorite wide receiver out of last year's draft class. I really liked him. I think that he is going to be a star in the league this year, and he kind of showed it, even though he's battling a little bit of injuries last year. He showed what he could do. And then that's not even mentioning that they still have Corey Davis as a nice veteran presence who is very inconsistent, but has shown that he can boom and have a really good season like he did in that last year with the Titans before he came over to the Jets the year after.
Yeah, the Jets are just a little bit too young for me, I think.
That's what I said. That's why I started with I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I think these guys really have a chance to step up.
Yeah, and kind of they have that potential, kind of like with the Panthers and their receiving duo.
Exactly.
Trio, with the potential talk, the same kind of dynamic there.
Certainly. So now to Callan with number 9.
So for number 9, I got the Dallas Cowboys, who have raw speed all around, and that puts them pretty high up on my list. With CeeDee Lamb, Mike Gallup, and Jalen Tolbert, who are all very fast, timed-out guys with 40 speeds. This is just a very, very fast receiver trio. And they're kind of too young for their own good, which is why they're not as high, but I think that after this year, these guys could be into the top 5.
Yep, I really like the Cowboys too. CeeDee Lamb is probably my second favorite receiver from the 2020 class. You guys, I'm sure, can guess who my first favorite receiver is. But I've always really liked CeeDee Lamb. Jalen Tolbert has huge upside. And yeah, Michael Gallup just has speed that kills, so you can't go wrong with that. Jumping over to my number 9, I actually have one of the teams Callan kind of mentioned in his honorable mention. In fact, I'm pretty sure I have all the teams Callan mentioned in his honorable mention, so that just shows that we kind of looked at it a little bit different. But the first one coming up here at number 9 is the Washington Commanders. Now you look at their lead guy like Terry McLaurin leading the way. He has just shown that he's kind of a do-it-all guy. He can beat you deep. He's a crisp route runner. So it's really fun to watch him play, and I'm really excited to see what he can do this year. And then they have kind of that established slot guy in Curtis Samuel. Now, he, of course, played at the Panthers before this and never really did much. And to be honest, he didn't do near as much as I thought he would in Washington so far after his first year there. But I think that he's really got a chance to step up. And then you have that potential in a first-round pick with Jahan Dotson from this draft. So another rookie here, but another rookie that I think could really step up and do well and is NFL ready.
Yeah, Curtis Samuel just didn't show me enough last year to show that he's a true number 2 option. Obviously, Fast Terry got his big extension, and so he's their top-heavy number 1. But I think that behind Terry McLaurin, they just don't have enough talent.
I think they got the talent. I think their actual output weighs on Carson Wentz's back, so we'll see how that goes.
The quarterback definitely factored in a little there, too.
Yep. So now we'll jump to number 8.
For number 8, I got the New Orleans Saints, who, with a great quarterback, the eater of W's himself, they got the trio of Slant Man, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, who I think is going to have a career year, and a pro-ready Chris Olave. I think with all that combined, that they're going to be one of the top receiving trios in the NFL this year.
I like these Saints mostly because of their depth, to be dead honest, because even behind Chris Olave, the rookie, they still have Marquez Callaway, who I think can do really well. They have little Jordan Humphrey, who just is a big body, ironically, considering his name. But they just got all that depth. They've got a lot of guys who can go out and get you some first downs. I don't really trust Michael Thomas actually even playing
It
this
all
whole
depends
season.
if he comes back.
Whether it's he doesn't start and then he comes back, or if he does start and then gets re-injured, I really don't see him playing this whole season. And I really like Jarvis Landry. I love Juice, I really do. But I can't see him as a wide receiver 1, and that's why I had them a little lower on my list. I didn't even have them very near top 10, to be honest.
I think, without Michael Thomas, they fall into the top 15. But I am going to assume that he's going to come back and be back to form.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is depth, though, so I do got to give him that. Jumping to my number 8, I have the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, of course, looking at the Chargers, you got to factor in Justin Herbert being the up-and-coming elite quarterback in the NFL a little bit, but I try to not factor in the quarterbacks a ton. So starting with their actual receivers, you look at Keenan Allen, who has just consistently year after year proved himself as continuing to be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Right behind him, you got Mike Williams, who is a elite deep threat, in my opinion. Now, just deep threat, because a lot of his game really rides on that boom or bust, and he can't find much consistency. But when he does boom, man, he goes off for a lot of yards. And then finally, the up-and-coming Josh Palmer, who is a guy that I talked a lot about last year, who has been doing really well so far in camp and stuff and during the off-season. And he got a few flashes last year, but just didn't get a ton of opportunities. But I think he'll get a lot more this year, and it'll play out well for Josh Palmer and the Chargers.
Yeah, I just think the Chargers didn't have enough depth. They were one of my honorable mentions because I think Keenan Allen is one of the top wide receivers in the NFL. Mike Williams, he's just too injury prone. I just couldn't put him up there. But I do understand why they are on the list. So for you.
Yep, certainly. So now we will jump to 7.
For number 7, unfortunately, I have to put them because it's the Minnesota Vikings, and I have to put them because they have 2 of the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL, in my opinion. But as Bobby the Brain Heenan once said, who is the third man? Who is the third man? I mean, there's KJ Osborne, Amir Smith-Marset, Irv Smith. It's just none of those 3 guys really were able to completely step up and prove that they could be the trio. This is more ranked just on a duo, but whoever the third man is, will put them even higher into the list if they can step up and really perform this year.
To even stack onto your point a little bit, just kind of through the offseason and through OTAs and stuff, Vikings inside reporters have actually been saying that Dalvin Cook has even been lining up at wide receiver a few times, so that almost adds a third or another option on top of that if you really want to look at it that way. But yeah, I definitely agree. We don't have that true established third, but maybe that's just me being a homer, but I'd almost look at that as a good thing that you have all those options to be your third. But nevertheless, sometimes when you don't have that established one, it does make it rough to put them in a ranking somewhere. So I see what you're saying. Moving on to my number 7. Now here comes in the Las Vegas Raiders for me. Now, of course, starting off with Davonte Adams, just truly elite. There's not really much else you can say about him. He can do it all. And then you look at Hunter Renfrow, and God, you just get pure consistency from him. He's not going to be flashy. He's not going to wow you here or there, but he is going to get you those first downs. He is going to make those clutch catches, and he's going to get some touchdowns and just always be open and have good hands, solid hands that will not drop it. And then finally, you look at that third slot, and I kind of slotted in Darren Waller, but you could also kind of look at Keelan Cole as a slot maybe, who they picked up this offseason. But looking at Darren Waller, I mean, this guy is more of a receiver than he is a tight end. He's just a huge body receiver who's pretty damn fast for a tight end. And then you get a little bit of injury proneness with him is kind of what made me drop the Raiders a little bit. But overall, I think a very good squad.
Yeah, they definitely do have the talent, that's for sure. I just didn't want to put them in the rankings because of the top-heavy number 1. I mean, without Davonte Adams, I don't even know if they would have been top 15 last year with Bryan Edwards and Hunter Renfrow. So Davonte really helps with their ranking. But, you know, it's about the trios.
It is about the trios. It's about the trios for sure. So now moving on to number 6.
For number 6, I got the Denver Broncos, who are an experienced, young, and all-around uber-talented group. And with Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, and Who's their third one?
Huh? Cortland Sutton.
Cortland Sutton. I always forget Cortland Sutton.
Mr. Injury.
Yes, and that's why. They are all really talented, and I have them up at 6 because they have to all three stay healthy. And you have to wonder, will Russ cook a better Denver omelet than a Seattle stew? I mean, that all depends. He's
big.
definitely got all the ingredients for it now. We'll have to see if he can perform. But just off of the talent alone, I got them at 6.
Very different receiving core going from Seattle to Denver, so that's an interesting point. I wonder how that will affect Russ. And ironically, going from Seattle to Denver, we're going to be going from Denver to Seattle because at my number 6, I have the Seahawks as my number 6. And now starting off again, this is going to be a pretty consistent point throughout all of mine, but you start out with that elite number 1. You got DK Metcalf. He had a little bit of a down year last year, but if you look at him, he is just a physical beast. It is crazy what he can do at his size, his speed, his strength. And then behind him, you got Tyler Lockett, who is almost the dead opposite. He's kind of like Hunter Renfrow, where I don't know how he does it, but he's just always open, and he's almost always open on a deep ball, even though he's not overly fast. So that's the really funny part. Must just have a great release or great route running or something. But those work really well together when you have that physical beast and then you have that guy who can just always get open. And then I would actually like to add in another tight end as my 3 for this one and go with Noah Fant, who was just traded to them from the Denver Broncos in that Russell Wilson trade. And I think he's going to show up. He really reminds me of Darren Waller. He's kind of more of a receiver almost than a tight end. He's insanely fast for a tight end. He's a big guy, but he did go to Iowa, so he can actually block pretty well too, so that always helps him out. But looking at the receiving part of it, I think he's going to step up and play a much bigger role in that offense than people think.
Yeah, this one for me, the quarterback just drug them down too much. There's too much unknown at the quarterback. I mean, it's between Geno Smith and Drew Lock, so those receivers had a down year last year with Russell Wilson. I don't know if they're going to do any better with one of these other two. But
I'd agree. Not knowing who your quarterback's going to be week in and week out can also bring down your talent as much as anything else can. But now we'll jump to number 5.
For number 5, I got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because, I mean, TB12 has 3 of his type of guys at wide receiver. They have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Russell Gage. All 3 guys that came back and played because Brady wanted them there. And the only one that didn't come back was Gronk.
Ironic twist.
But Russell Gage went from Atlanta to Tampa Bay just specifically because Tom Brady asked him to. So he's getting his 3 guys there, and then there's all 3 talented guys. I mean, they almost should be, I feel, higher than 5. But with Brady's age, we'll see if it can carry over. I mean, I feel like it's got to catch up to him sometime.
You got to imagine it does. And I actually also have the Bucs right there at number 5. So kind of adding on to what Callan just said, Mike Evans has every year of his career, I'm pretty sure, 7-8 years now in a row, been a 1,000-yard receiver. So that's impressive. That just shows that he's always going to get it done. But then you move over to Chris Godwin, and he's still very good, don't get me wrong, but he was injured last year. He kind of showed some inconsistencies. And then Russell Gage is a play I really like, kind of a speedy guy coming out of the slot. But he's getting a little older. He's on a new team now. It's just hard to think about, but it's hard to not rank these guys anything not top 5 with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So I put him right at that 5.
And then Russell Gage just adds to it, who was Atlanta's number 1 wide receiver last year.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So now we will jump to number 4.
For number 4, I have the Buffalo Bills, who... Now this is a team that kind of has an obvious number 1, but I feel like great Gabriel Davis will sustain his success from late last season, and he will prove to be a true number 2. And I think Jamison Crowder is that perfect number 3 for the Buffalo Bills to fill that slot role and play that Cole Beasley spot left vacant by Cole Beasley.
Yeah, I agree. They're a really good team. I actually don't even have them in my top 10. A little bit of a spoiler there. Mostly just because Gabe Davis makes me a little nervous. I really like Gabe Davis, but if you look at his actual stats from last year, it was nothing special. A lot of people just look at that last 4-touchdown game against the Chiefs, but I don't like overly judging it on one game. But if he does continue that, certainly top 5. And then, everything else just kind of fell into place for them. But that true number 2 receiver, I was just a little nervous about putting up there.
I understand it. I went off a lot into potential and talent.
Yeah. So at my number 4, I have the Los Angeles Rams. I had both Los Angeles teams on my list. Now, again, let's start. Elite wide receiver with Cooper Kupp. You got to look right at that. And then you have the new guy in town there with Allen Robinson, who's just kind of a consistent guy, great route runner. He's going to get open. Really fell off towards the end there in Chicago, but a lot of people fell off in Chicago. There was a lot of mixing happened there, and it was just kind of time for Allen Robinson to get a change of scenery. And then you look at that number 3 with Van Jefferson, who was another guy from 2020 that I really, really like. And he's not going to really be a consistent guy, but he's constantly going to be able to take the top off the defense, which is something you need, especially when you have 2 receivers like Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. So they all just complement each other so well that I had to put them up high on the list.
Yeah, and I actually have the Rams as my number 3.
Oh, let's jump right to number 3 then.
So I have them as with 3 to 4 potential Pro Bowl players because I believe that once he is healthy, OBJ will sign with the Rams, and he will be that third or fourth option behind Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. And then you still got Van Jefferson for a deep threat. You could have possibility of 4 Pro Bowl players being on the Rams, and that's just, that's a lot of what ifs. But if those ifs do happen, it all is going to come together for him, and they'll be one of the top teams in the NFL.
Man, that's easy street for Stafford. I bet he loves that receiver core there.
Yeah,
so
now you can see if he can stay healthy too.
Yeah, for real, that's true. He's getting older. So now jumping on to my number 3, I finally have my team. I slotted in here the Minnesota Vikings. Now, like a broken record, let's go again. Where do you start? Elite wide receiver, Justin Jefferson. My God, this guy can just do it all. Most receiving yards by a rookie, and then followed that up by having the most receiving yards in the first 2 years by anybody in the NFL. Continued success. Over 3,000 receiving yards in his first 2 years, and I really don't see him slowing down anytime soon, so that's just insane. And then you move on next to Adam Thielen, who counts that he's a top 10, and when he's healthy and not kind of injured every other week like he was last season.
He's a top 10 versus Green Bay every time
he's a top 10 versus Green Bay, and my favorite thing about Adam Thielen, though, is he is just a red zone master. That man always seems to find a way to get open in the red zone. And I want to say he had 14 touchdowns the season before last. And as I just mentioned a little bit ago, he's kind of on and off injured last season, but I think he still had like 7 or 8, which is crazy for how many games he missed. And then I slotted in the third as KJ Osborne, because just something about KJ Osborne, he has that clutch gene, man. He had 2 or maybe even 3 game-winning touchdowns last year, or at least very late touchdowns that kind of won us the game. So that is just insane to think about, especially for how young he is. He came out of 2020 with Justin Jefferson. He's just a really good slot guy. He's a crisp route runner on the short part. He's pretty fast. He's got the speed to get through some of those nickel corners. So I just really like our receiving core this year.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the 2 guys put them up in the top 10 by themselves. So if you think KJ Osborne is the third man?
I'd put KJ Osborne just because we haven't really got to see what Irv Smith can do yet. I think he's going to do amazing. Sadly, he had that injury last year. But just since we haven't really got to see him yet, I did go with KJ Osborne.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And on to number 2 then. For my number 2, I believe we have the same number 2.
We do.
It is the Cincinnati Bengals, who, they have 3 starting caliber wide receivers. They have, what did I put here? They have experience, chemistry, and moxie from that Super Bowl run last year. And then you got Burrow, who's going to continue with them and carry over from last year. I just think that this is almost the top trio in the NFL. But there's one team that I think has more talent than the Bengals.
Yep, and then jumping over to me with the Bengals, as Callum mentioned, same team. You have that speed, size, and consistency. You find your speed there with Jamar Chase. I'm not going to give him elite quite yet. I think he could easily step in there. But even Justin Jefferson, I didn't give a lead after only 1 year.
That's
but
true.
he
They don't
does-
have the elite guy.
Exactly.
They just have 3 starting
He
guys.
certainly has that speed, and then you get that size with T. Higgins, who I think is going to have a huge breakout year, considering defenses are going to kind of focus in a little more on Jamar Chase. And then you just have your consistently proven veteran with Tyler Boyd there in the middle. I almost said Taj Boyd, mix them up. But Tyler Boyd there kind of in the slot, playing that little bit of the more slot role, getting those hard catches, kind of attracting the defense. So you just love to see when they play off each other well like that, and you can have a 1, 2, 3 who are all very good and have proven themselves in the NFL.
Yeah, all 3 of these guys could start on probably about any other team in the NFL.
Yep, so now we will move to the number 1, and ironically, my number 1 isn't even in Callan's top 5, and Callan's number 1 isn't even in my top 10. So
that
here
just
we
goes
go.
to show how different we graded these.
Exactly.
So for my number 1, now quarterback aside, this is not putting the quarterback in it at all. Fins up for the Miami Dolphins as the top trio of wide receivers in the NFL. And my argument here is that they have 3 of the best wide receivers from 3 different teams last year. They have Tyreek Hill, who was the top wide receiver on the Chiefs. They have Jalen Waddle, who was their own top receiver last year. And then they have Cedric Wilson, who will be their slot man and who tied for the most receiving touchdowns on the Dallas Cowboys last year, which in my opinion should give you one of the top notations for being a top wide receiver. So just that alone shows that they have a massive amount of talent, experience, and yes, Tua would probably bring them down. But quarterback aside, I believe that they are the most talented group.
I agree that this group has limitless talent, but actually what kind of got me even more than Tua was just the playbook. It doesn't really make sense for those type of receivers, all that speed, all that deep threat, to be in the Dolphins playbook, because with Mike Daniels, the new head coach that they have there in Miami from San Francisco, you got to imagine he's going to run a run-heavy offense just like he did in San Francisco. And then you got Tua, who can't really accurately throw the deep ball, and then same with the offensive playbook coming from San Francisco, where the deep ball was never really thrown. It was a lot of run after catch. Just makes me a little nervous the way that those all fall together. But they do have a lot of talent, but that just kind of really brought them down on my list.
It's Mike McDaniel.
Mike McDaniel.
Mike Daniel is the defensive lineman for the Hawkeyes and the Packers and the Bengals.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
As soon as I said it, I was like,
I know. I was like, I don't think that's
it's
right.
so close, but it's not right. I knew it.
I had to check it there.
But that is why I don't have the Dolphins as my number 1. And now jumping to my number 1, I have none other than the Denver Broncos. Now, kind of same thing I said with the Bengals. When you can look at this and just say 1, 2, 3, all consistently good and kind of proven wide receivers, I love to see that, and it's all I see with the Broncos. You look at Cortland Sutton, when he's not injured, he was one of the top receivers in the AFC the year before last when he wasn't overly injured. And then you have Jerry Jeudy, who's a rising star, a first-round pick back in 2020. And then when those guys were injured, like Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick stepped up and took over that role so well. I thought he really proved himself last year amidst all the injuries and those kind of questions that they had at quarterback throughout the season. What he's able to do with all that confusion around him really impressed me. So pretty simply, they're just so good across the board, and that's why I have the Denver Broncos as my 1.
If not for their injury history, I think I would have had them higher. But with both Jeudy and Sutton being hurt last year,
definitely risky with the injuries. And, Jeudy almost went to jail, so that also happened.
that doesn't help either.
So off the field risk as well. But just looking at talent, I really like the Broncos. So that was our kind of prediction or opinion on the top 10 most talented receiving trios in the NFL. Let us know in the comments if you thought there were some teams that should be on here or some teams that you thought, what? How did they rank that high in the NFL?
I love causing controversy.
You gotta stir the pot for sure. But thank you all so much for watching nevertheless. And until next time, don't forget
to eat the W.